Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Hybrid Geek Podcast, episode number 95 with Sasha Chada, who is the founder and CEO of Ivy Scholars. They do work supporting in a very deep and kind of longitudinal way, supporting prospective students who are looking to be competitive candidates for their colleges of choice. So really interesting stuff. Definitely a new world for me. I was really excited to hear more about Sasha's story and the work that he's doing with his team there. So I shared out a lot of great resources that they've curated, as well as a couple of good books that he is reading in relation to this work. So definitely go check out Ivy Scholars, all the work that they're doing, and all the resources that we shared down in the show notes. And a brief mention here, because I know I've been posting episodes weekly with a lot of bonus episodes over the past several weeks. We'll be letting you know for the latter half of this year, I guess not really half, but the remainder of this year, we will be going back to every other week episodes just to slow down a bit. We had a lot of great people reaching out, and I wanted to make sure we were able to get them in as soon as possible, but should be able to, maybe only have the occasional bonus episode versus it being pretty much every single week for the past couple of months. So certainly appreciate, as always, any ideas for guest topics, any of that good stuff. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, anywhere else. But so with all that being said, and after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 95 with Sasha Chada. This episode is sponsored by Degree.me, a one-stop college research tool for students. If you work for a college or university, you'll want to learn all about their ability to connect you with the right students at a budget-friendly price. To find out more, please visit degree.me/HEG. Cool. Well, thank you so much for jumping on to hang out for the podcast here. It's going to be, I think, a very informative episode for myself, the work that you're doing. And I know other folks will, it'd be great to kind of turn them on to the work that you're doing as well. So if you want to just kind of kick us off as we always do, introduce yourself and give everybody kind of a brief overview of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Sasha Chada. I run Ivy Scholars. I was the last person I would pick to be CEO of an education company when I was graduating high school. I always loved teaching. I volunteered as a teacher and a tutor and to help with test prep when I was in high school. And when I got to Hopkins, I started volunteering and then working in the development office, which is related to fundraising. And that put me in really close proximity to admissions. And at the same time, I was going to college for pre-med. And then I was also majoring in philosophy because pre-med's not a major at Hopkins. So I was doing my med school apps, and I realized just how much I loved writing these essays, and I was helping my friends, and they were sort of tearing their hair out, trying to figure out how they would be different from the 100 other pre-meds at Hopkins, each of whom were all very competitive and very smart and worked really hard and had a lot of experience. And it was that kind of differentiation, just making our personalities come through, that really appealed to me. I loved for a second feeling like we were in control of our narrative, that we were telling a story not just about what we thought med school admissions committees wanted to hear, but really of who we are and the kind of change we saw we could make in the world as pre-meds and as med students. But I didn't want to go to med school. I was realizing I didn't love biology enough to study it for another 6 years. And I wasn't enamored with medicine. So I went back home after I graduated to figure things out. And my brother was 4.5 years younger than me, and he was just starting the college admissions process. So as an older brother, there's a lot of things I hope to make a lot easier for my younger brother, to give him the hard-won wisdom I got, because I certainly submitted my essays with 3 days left on the clock, almost to the end of December, which was not something you should do ever. And I wanted it to be better for him. And I'd put together so much admissions knowledge from Hopkins, and I began to see how opaque this process was, how much anxiety there was around it, that you were a 17-year-old trying to choose what you do for the rest of your life, or that's what it felt like at the time, and prove yourself to, what felt like these shadowy admissions officers, that you would be a good fit for their school, whatever that meant. And what exaggerated that was that we, as a family, we were all really nervous about this process. My family put a really big emphasis on education. It's what let my dad come to this country. He immigrated here from Ireland. And it was, for my mom, a big point for her to prove herself, because she grew up in an era where women generally didn't get higher education degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So both of them went through a radically different experience than me and my brother did. And I started realizing as I was coaching my brother, well, my mom went to UCLA when the admit rate was just under 70%. So most of the people who applied would get in unless there was something like a big issue. You'd failed a couple classes. The admit rate when my brother was applying to UCLA was 13%. This was about 5 times harder. My dad didn't go to school in this country at all. And we didn't have that sort of blueprint a lot of families had for the process. And the game had changed so much from when my mom went to school. I started putting together a sort of end-to-end explanation on how you become a really great college applicant and how you present yourself in a way that's authentic, but also competitive, and avoid falling into a lot of the pitfalls that I've seen way too many of my friends and my colleagues fall into. And doing this just spread. My brother's friends' parents started calling me, some at like 10, 11 p.m., being like, I really need to talk to you. We really want to figure this out. I just saw there was so much passion around helping kids get a great education and present themselves in the college admissions process, but there was so little knowledge on how to actually do that.
Yeah.
And in the process, I found what would eventually become Ivy Scholars.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's very interesting to me, because it is one of those things where I would assume people working in higher ed, especially, I mean, if you're not at admissions and generally like you're kind of acknowledging people who are, it's like, oh, well, I mean, you applied to college, maybe several years ago or decades ago or something, and know how much it's changed. But then also like that, I think it can be very opaque, like you said, and you're kind of just navigating it on your own to try to discern, maybe what's relevant to be included in anything or not, or how to just sort of frame things. And, certainly a lot of value of just like, more of a near peer experience versus, maybe somebody who, went through a process a longer time ago or something like that, just crystallizing at least just how important it was to, if nothing else, just have someone who is a kind of an advocate or just someone who is committed to, like you said, just really highlighting your strengths and kind of helping you explain your narrative and those sort of things. But I think, it is somewhat of a game, I guess, if it is sort of just like acknowledging like, well, these are the things that are really going to help you to stand out so that somebody does kind of maybe look deeper into, any other unique parts of your background. But I guess, before I start kind of like, getting ahead of myself, if you want to just sort of, get into kind of the details of like what Ivy Scholars itself does, because it kind of gave us the journey up until that point. So just explain a little bit more about the work you do now. And I guess maybe like, because I guess I'm curious, like how early it could start for somebody and sort of just maybe what a typical kind of, journey or workflow would be for somebody who, sort of getting help with their application and everything.
Ivy Scholars is a candidacy building company. And that means we help students who come to us become the kind of candidates their target colleges want to accept. And I'm really careful to describe Ivy Scholars like that, and not as a company that helps you with test prep or your college essays, because I want that mentorship and guidance to be front and center of what we do. I think trying to just sell a service without selling the idea that you're going to walk people through this process and teach them what they don't know and help them find what's best for them is missing the point. So Ivy Scholars starts with students as early as 7th grade. And when we do, we're meeting with them a few times a year, and we're helping them understand what's available in terms of extracurriculars and what interests they have and how they can pursue them. And then also starting to talk about work habits, how they do time management, how they plan out studying, so that as they go through their academic journey, they feel a little more in control of what they're doing, and they feel like they, the students, are making choices on what's best for them. And I love helping students form that attitude really early, that they're in control of the process and they are making choices, and they're not sort of responding to their parents' or other adults' pressure on what other people think is right for them. Mm-hmm. Building that sense of agency, even if you're only spending 4 hours a year meeting with a student once a quarter, returns amazing dividends later on. So when students get to 9th grade, we enroll them in the candidacy building program, and we meet with them generally about once every 2 weeks. And we start working through extracurriculars that they're performing in, and asking, where can we find a passion that you want to develop? Where can we find some skill, some topic you want to be involved in? Often it's a community problem they want to do something about just to make the world around them a little better. And these turn into profile projects that end up making students 5 times as admissible as some of their peers. But the magic of this is that even though these things sound extraordinary, we've had students who have programmed apps that are used by nonprofits that help coordinate the services of those nonprofits, or they've created groups that have done a lot to clean up their neighborhood or make their local community better in these really profound ways, but it never feels like a Herculean task. It just feels step by step, week by week. We find that 9th and 10th graders are capable of some awesome stuff that doesn't take earth-shattering genius. It just takes persistence and focus and determination and the willingness to start doing things that are scary and troubleshoot to find where you're going wrong and work with a mentor who you can really trust, who you can be open with about what's not working for you, to evaluate your goals and make incremental progress.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. I mean, just the way that you frame it is, just really resonant. I mean, because I think maybe some other organizations, it's just maybe, I don't know, like some of those other things you mentioned that just would come across as more like transactional. Like, we help you with the test, you take the test, you get the score, and then you're sort of like, on your way, or different things like that. But yeah, just a very longitudinal kind of mentoring and coaching and that sort of thing. So yeah, that people, these students are making the most of their time as early as possible, as early as they're ready to start thinking ahead like that. So I guess, yeah, I mean, if there's any sort of like anecdotes or examples of work that you've done, anything that really kind of is compelling or like helps motivate you, just examples of like what you kind of enjoy most about the work that you're doing, like the way that you're able to work with these students.
Well, I'll say 2 things. The first, I just wanted to respond. You're right. The longitudinal approach is really great. It's something I love, and I find it's much more effective than people give it credit for. Students will come to Ivy Scholars from companies that are more transactional, and they'll say, well, we did test prep for a while, but our scores didn't really go up. Or, we've sort of worked on college essays, but I feel like it's just, we're looking at it, we know it's not good. I don't feel good about this. And I take that as our chance to get to do something awesome with them and really help them in a way that they weren't even sure they could be helped. And the uptick in morale you see there when you're really listening to a student is fantastic. I want to give you one of my favorite examples. It was a student I worked with 3 years ago. So we were talking about programming, and he really wanted to go in computer science. And he also had some interest in business. We were sort of going through a curriculum where he was learning different programming languages and exploring what he could do. And he did some proof of concept stuff, but we just weren't finding a project he was really passionate about, And that was hard because he was putting a lot of pressure on himself. He wanted to go to a great institution. His parents had worked very hard to get him a lot of opportunities. And he was a really great guy and really wanted to live up to that. But we had spent, a month or two working on things. We made progress, but it wasn't yet clicking. Then Hurricane Harvey happened. So he and his parents were in an apartment building, and they were watching the news, and he was seeing the water rise. And he came and called me, and we were on the phone, and he said, I think I could do something here. I think I can create what ended up being a Facebook API just to coordinate people who owned private watercraft with people who were on their roofs flooded out. We're located in Houston, and in Houston, Hurricane Harvey was disastrous, and it destroyed a lot of people's homes, and it was tremendously scary. And this 16-year-old young man, in the space of 28 hours of almost nonstop coding, put all this together, and then he had to call his internet service provider, and he had to talk them through changing servers on their end to make things fit technically. And we were on the phone for part of that. I was just thinking, man, this kid is a hero. And he wasn't doing anything that's impossible, anything a normal human being couldn't do. He just learned a lot of programming, and he was constantly searching for ways to apply his skills. And when he saw the opportunity, he took it. Mm-hmm. So in the end, about 100 people used that, and they got rescued. And I'm not sure I've ever been more proud of one of my students.
Yeah,
we wrote that in his college applications. Thank you. Yeah, he's an incredible guy. I feel so fortunate to work here. I've met so many students who I think are amazing, and I'm sure I'm going to read their names in the news someday. He's at Vanderbilt now, and he's doing some other really awesome stuff. And I love getting to keep up with my students because it's never boring when, we're calling back 6 months later and we're saying, hi, how are you? It's always, Sasha, like, let me tell you what I'm doing. And there's this vivacity, this passion, and getting to be a part of that is such a blessing and a gift for me.
That's so great. Yeah, I mean, just as a great example too. I mean, because I think even like you said, I guess like even engaging in just sort of a minimal way, like you're maybe like, an hour per quarter or something, especially earlier on, but like it just gets someone thinking. And then if they're thinking in that sort of critical lens of like, what can I do, sort of this community problem and that thing, and they're looking for they're looking for an opportunity to help their community, so like it's just so fascinating, because even then, I mean, it was definitely kind of a more of a micro example, but obviously it mattered so much to those people that it helped. So I guess with all of that, like that being like a really powerful example of the kind of work that you're doing with students, do you feel like there's anything just about this very unique moment that the world is in right now, when you're working with students, do you feel like there's something unique that makes your work especially relevant right now, or just kind of speaking generally to maybe how, the kind of global pandemic and different things has impacted your work, if you have noticed any of those changes?
Working with students by Zoom doesn't build the same degree of interpersonal connection without extra effort from both parties. And what I'm seeing from the students of Ivy Scholars, and I think a lot of students now who are realizing distance learning is my future and this pandemic isn't going away, is a kind of commitment to saying, this isn't the education I wanted, but it's the education that's going to happen, and I want to make the most of it. And the attitude we have at Ivy Scholars, that there is a tremendous amount to make the most of. There's a huge amount of potential for high school students. There are so many problems that need to be solved, so many organizations that students can work with, so much growth to be had for people who are organized and diligent about it. I like that I see so many people rising to the occasion in really tumultuous, really scary times to embody that attitude and pursue projects that I think will help them grow as human beings and learn, and also make them far more admissible when they apply to college in a year or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because there's also like, and I guess just briefly, I wonder how you see maybe this factoring in is like, if the interpersonal, the kind of on ground experience is what a certain student is looking for, sometimes like navigating that kind of the gap year space, trying to make the most of that year. If you maybe, take that time, take a break to make yourself into even more of a competitive candidate, or know even better, the right institution, the right program, or any of those sort of things. So do you see those sort of things coming up as well, that some people might be like, well, you know what, I'm willing to wait to know better because I don't know yet maybe what my like kind of, community problem would be, as sort of this guiding light for, essays and just trying to find like the right program and those sort of things. Do you see that coming up at all in terms of like how you're working with students, like gap years kind of factoring in?
Yeah, a lot of students are uncertain as to the best way to conduct their education. The biggest piece of uncertainty is no one knows how long the pandemic will last. And when you're 18, and you're not going to college and you're not leaving the house, especially your parents' house, a major question arises of what it is you're going to do with your time. I've had a lot of families say to me, well, I don't want to pay sticker price for a year of tuition at a university that has no dorms, no student culture, no experience, no extracurriculars. That's just Zoom classes. I think it's an incredible amount to ask of young people, of 18-year-olds who are just going off to college, to say, well, you've still got these resources of the university. You've got dedicated faculty and staff, and you've got a student body, and you can do something with that, but you've got to envision all of it yourself. Ivy Scholars stepping in and helping students with gap year plans, whether they're trying to make the most out of their university experience or they want to pursue something like a 6-month internship, has been really challenging for us. It's certainly something I didn't have a playbook for, and for every student, I really try to get to know them and find what's going to be right for them. I do think, though, that the same philosophy I was talking about holds true here, and that initiative and the determination to find something, even if you haven't found your thing yet, just the determination to build skills so when you do find your thing, you're ready for it, is the best attitude a student can take for themselves to get them through what's undoubtedly going to be a crazy school year.
Yeah, I mean, just the ambiguity, the uncertainty is just a powerful force that could make planning your future for anybody very, very difficult. So Well, I usually asked this earlier, but I still want to see kind of where it kind of lands for you. But you've spoken a lot about the work that you're doing right now with Ivy Scholars, and obviously just kind of your origin story, as it were. But I guess just like to put a finer point on it, do you feel like there's anything in particular, since you did kind of make a pivot in terms of your own, your major in college and some of the things you were doing, but I mean, you majored in philosophy and, obviously you probably had to take a lot of courses in that subject area. Do you feel like there are just sort of like values or mentors or like your network or something, anything that was like really impactful from your own college experience that still resonates for you today?
Well, I had great peers at Hopkins. I really enjoyed the people I went to class with, who I got to work with. It was just a privilege having a group of people who are all really enthusiastic about learning and worked well as a team. I didn't see at the time how much work went in from the admissions office towards building a student body that wasn't just full of smart students, but smart students who'd work well together and who would form a great team. I'd say what's most inspiring to me about that was I saw students who took a step beyond hard work and really confronted their priorities for what they wanted out of their high school and college experience and tried to take a driver's seat to their life, which is something that's very difficult to do at a young age. And these weren't people who uniformly were right. I was not alone, certainly, in changing my mind and having to totally pivot careers. I think that's an incredibly normal thing. So what I try to take from that to communicate to high school students is that it doesn't really matter if you have a great plan for what you're going to do in college, you know what you want to do with the rest of your life. That's probably going to change anyway. What really does matter is you find things that are important to you now, places you want to make a difference, things you want to learn. You stop sort of restraining your passion in the service of a grander plan or a bigger picture. And you say, I want to do something great. I'm going to try it. If it fails, I'll learn something from it. If it succeeds, maybe I will, or maybe I won't stick with it, but I'm not slowing down for anything.
Yeah, such a great message. I think that is a very important one, because I think people feel compelled to have that kind of, broader 5, 10, 15-year plan, like everything's charted out and, you're just kind of riding along the rails. But far better, I think, to definitely have a little bit more flexibility, kind of transferable skills in that way. But so, yeah, I mean, just this can be kind of more of a fun question, I guess, just kind of on a personal level or, and or a professional level, whatever kind of resonates. But, what are you geeking out about right now? Like, what's grabbing your attention, whether it's, it is something related to work or not. But yeah, just going to take that as you will. What are you geeking out about right now?
Well, two things. I'm having a lot of fun. My friends and I have started a weekly Discord improv group. So learning about that and practicing for that has been really cool. It's certainly not something I would have pursued if I could have left the house. But with social distancing limiting a lot of socialization options, I found it to be really cool. On a professional level, this has been a chance for me to do a lot more research and dig into a lot of the admissions disclosures that have come out over the past decade, most notably from the Harvard lawsuit about Asian Americans and admit rates, but also from a lot of other former admissions officers who spoke about how their university admissions office worked. One of the great insights I've had that I've done my best to incorporate into Ivy Scholars is that there are so many students who are in what get called traditional career tracks. So very often something like pre-med, pre-business, pre-law, computer science, things that have very strong vocational potential. And these fields are becoming so overloaded that the admit rate for these majors can be a third or even a quarter of the admit rate in general for a school. So it could be 3 to 4 times as competitive to land in one of these majors as in a university in general. And to me, that's a little crazy. That there's students who have picked a course of study, not a career, but just a course of study to start with. And then their chances of going to the university they want with that major is drastically reduced. Mm-hmm. One of my big developments this last year is trying to help students who want one of these oversubscribed majors to find ways to present themselves that still include and are true to those interests, but don't focus on them exclusively. And to help students tell more interesting stories. there's always a few students who come to us every year who have a story something like, my parents worked hard and they've given me a lot of opportunities, and I want to continue that, and I want to go to Wall Street and be an investment banker and make good money. And that's sort of the extent of my story and ambitions. And I think maybe dreaming past that isn't too realistic. And uniformly at Ivy Scholars, it's my job to help these students find something that's more cool, persuasive, interesting, that's more personal to them than just ambition. Having all this time as a result of the pandemic and sort of leafing through, I look through students' old essays, I meet with new students, and I listen to their story. I'm really enjoying putting together our playbook for how we take students who have ambitions that I think would get prima facie rejected a lot of the time because they are stories that are too common, that aren't differentiated enough, and helping our students who want to apply to these oversubscribed programs find unique and cool ways to present themselves.
Very interesting. Because I probably wouldn't have guessed that. I mean, I would always assume that a lot of students pursue those, but not that they're so overloaded that they, that become kind of selective because so many people, I guess, are interested. But and then I guess Discord improv, it does sound very, very unique. I don't know, I guess I'm not even sure how that would work, but I mean, we're all getting very creative right now in the pandemic, just to try to have some sense of normalcy or entertainment amidst everything else. So
the pandemic is a kind of microcosm, right? It forces us, because there's so many options we don't have. It forces us to confront, it's not as if we're shut off from the world. We've got the internet, we've got the ability to connect with people. How do we want to use our time? And I think that's a really interesting question for everyone, but especially for teenagers who now have this kind of unprecedented freedom, given that they can't go to school and can't follow this regular schedule kids that age normally do. Exploring what else we put in place of that, to me, is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very relevant perspective, I think, because I think, with that kind of framing in mind, it's certainly not putting the pressure on anybody to just you got to be productive every single second of every single day. It's like, well, no, I mean, just be thoughtful about how you are allotting your time and your energy. And it should be a pretty good harmonious balance where you feel kind of ready and energized to confront every day. But, that kind of implicit in that is like taking care of yourself, having some fun and all that. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting reset, I think, probably for some people of how they were spending their time and how are they able to do it now and how do they kind of triage, like how they're willing to commit their days. But well, kind of on that note, I guess just generally, things grabbing your attention, anything that you are reading, watching, and or listening to that you'd want to recommend so we could link out to it down in the show notes.
Sure. Michael Sugrue is a philosopher that has this really great lecture series I love. Personally, it's been my buddy as I've been running in the mornings in Houston, and I find it's a great way intellectually to start the day. It goes through a lot of human history and sort of charts the evolution of a lot of the stuff we take for granted, just a lot of the concepts that underpin our society. On a more professional note, there's some books I've been reading that I find to be really helpful when I'm talking to students about admissions and getting into college. One is If the U Fits by Kevin McMullen. Which is just a great primer for counseling and finding universities that are right for a student and helping students who, in a world where there's a lot of competition, a lot of pressure to go to the most prestigious school, find the school that they're going to be happiest at. Mm-hmm. And the other is A for Admission by Michelle Hernandez, which is just an inside look into admissions for anyone who's ever wondered, how does this work? How do people make these decisions? It's a great, nice, fairly technical chart of what's going on there.
So yeah, I mean, I think those are good. Yeah, I mean, just generally, if you can kind of get a primer before you even get started, perhaps on this journey, it could be good recommendations for any of the folks in your life who are looking to pursue higher education. But then, yeah, I mean, we'll wrap up as we always do. I mean, just, amidst all the stuff that we're kind of talking about, acknowledging the current kind of global context, but, anything that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world. So any of those categories, all of them, always just like to wrap things up on an optimistic note. But what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to this application season. I review every single essay at Ivy Scholars, and I kind of like getting to read them all at once and getting that admissions committee feel because it's cool to see the students from that angle. I'm also looking forward to fall, autumn for a different reason, because in Houston, it is so hot during the summer. So I wouldn't want to be outside too much anyway. But it will be lovely once the temperature falls below 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, I think because I'm based in Baltimore, it does get to be quite a bit muggy out. So there's like peak right now of kind of just not being super pleasant outside for any extended period of time. So definitely agree with you there. But and yeah, I guess that's fascinating. I mean, yeah, if you have eyes on so many different essays, it could just be just kind of settling into a different workflow. It's like, all right, let's like, just bring on all the essays, and good that you obviously enjoy that process, and obviously you're able to give good relevant feedback and guidance to all those folks. So that's so great. But I mean, thank you so much. I mean, just sharing all that you did about your journey and the work that you're doing, it's super unique stuff. And I'm so glad that we got to speak a bit about it and, share out ways to connect with you and all that you mentioned down the show notes as usual. But really appreciate your time and just kind of digging in here with the really great work that you're doing.
Thank you, Dustin. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.